The rain had already turned the afternoon grey when I walked into the bank. I wasn't there for business, just a quick errand to close an old savings account. But as soon as I stepped inside, I heard her voice. Vanessa, my wife. She was standing by the corner desk, laughing, her tone sharp and confident, the kind of laugh she used when she wanted everyone to know she was in control. The man beside her, a young loan officer with slicked hair, was nodding along, eyes on a thick stack of papers. "We've already uploaded his information," she was saying, "so we just need the final approval. It's all joint, under our name. The lender knows who carries the better credit." I froze. Our name. My credit. I took a step closer, pretending to wait in line, though my pulse was already hammering. I caught a few more words. Down payment processed, closing next week, beach property on Harbour Drive. I must have looked pale because the teller at the counter asked if I was all right. I nodded, but my eyes never left the corner table. When she finally turned and saw me, she didn't flinch. She smiled, a cool, rehearsed smile, and said, "Oh, honey, you're early." "Early for what?" I asked. "For our new life," she said, waving the papers in her hand. "Relax, it's our money. You'll thank me when we have ocean views." It was the way she said "our" that burned. The loan officer gave me a polite nod and said, "Everything's almost finalized, Mr. Hale. Your signature was already approved electronically. Just a few final checks and you'll be all set for the beach house." "My what?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Your beach property," he said, shuffling papers. "Mrs. Hale said this was part of your retirement plan." Vanessa crossed her arms, tilting her head. "You're overreacting again, Richard. I told you last month about the investment. You never listen." I stared at the paper, my name, my signature, my credit line, all in black and white, and I hadn't signed a thing. The bank manager noticed the tension and came over quickly. "Mr. Hale, if there's an issue, we can review your documentation." But Vanessa cut him off, laughing lightly. "There's no issue. He's just being dramatic. You know how husbands get when they're out of the loop." The manager hesitated, eyes flicking between us. I didn't argue. I just reached for my briefcase, the one I'd carried for 20 years, and unlatched it. Inside was a faded folder labelled Hale Family Power of Attorney, 2015. It was something she'd made me sign after her mother fell ill. "For emergencies," she'd said back then, "just so I can handle things if something ever happens to you." I'd trusted her. I'd trusted love more than logic. I looked up at her, my voice low. "You used this, didn't you?" She blinked, expression unreadable. "It's just paperwork, Richard. You're making it sound sinister." "Did you forge my approval?" Her tone turned icy. "Don't be paranoid. This is our future." The room had gone quiet. Customers pretended not to listen, but the silence between us was a spotlight. I felt my dignity straining under the weight of every watching eye. I turned to the bank manager. "Reverse the process. Immediately." He hesitated. "Sir, I'm afraid the transfer has already cleared the pre-authorization stage. Unless both parties, I interrupted. I never agreed to this." The manager's professional calm cracked just slightly. "Then we'll need to start an internal review." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, for God's sake, Richard. You're embarrassing yourself. This is why I never tell you things, because you always turn them into drama." Her voice was dismissive, her posture elegant and cruel. It wasn't just what she'd done, it was how little it meant to her. I closed my briefcase, straightened my jacket and said nothing. That silence. It's what she mistook for weakness. But inside it, something shifted. I could feel it. That moment wasn't about losing control. It was about reclaiming it, quietly, surgically, the way truth always moves before it strikes. As I walked out of the bank, the rain had stopped. The clouds had split open, streaks of light cutting through the wet glass. In the reflection of the window, I saw her still talking, waving her manicured hand, explaining something to the loan officer. Her world was made of paperwork and pretense. Mine was built on patience, and I'd just remembered how strong that foundation was. I reached into my briefcase, touched the worn edge of that old power of attorney folder, and whispered under my breath, "She thought she signed for a house. She didn't know she signed her ending." Before all the signatures, before the banks and the lies, there was just us. Two dreamers standing in front of a half-built house. I was 31, a marine engineer fresh off a long-term contract in the Gulf. My hands were cracked from salt and steel, but I had just enough saved to buy a small patch of land. I remember Vanessa laughing that first day we walked the property. "It's tiny," she'd said, twirling in the dust. "But it's ours." Back then, her smile wasn't rehearsed. It was real. She'd show up after work with sandwiches and coffee while I stayed late, laying each beam, each nail, with the same patience I thought our love was built on. When the roof went up, she hugged me and whispered, "You build things that last." I believed her. For years, life was simple. We didn't have much, but what we had was honest. My paychecks went into savings, and she handled the bills. Birthdays were home-cooked dinners. We'd fall asleep talking about growing old by the same window that faced the sunrise. But success, or the illusion of it, changes people. When my work stabilized and my income grew, Vanessa started looking beyond our small town. She wanted to travel, to host dinners that impressed her new friends, to finally live like we deserve. At first, I tried to keep up. A bigger car, a kitchen remodel, vacations she picked. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing her happy. She didn't want more, she wanted different. That's when the beach obsession began. She'd spend nights scrolling listings of oceanfront homes, whispering, "Can't you see us there? You could fix the dock, I'd start a small business." It sounded innocent enough. But then came the talk about investors, wealthy acquaintances she met at events. She told me about a partnership opportunity that required my signature to secure funding. Something in my gut told me to wait. "We're fine as we are," I said. "We don't need to chase someone else's dream." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're afraid of risk, Richard. That's why you'll always stay small." That one line stayed with me. Stay small. The marriage didn't break in one blow. It cracked in quiet ways. Late nights at her meetings, missed calls, passwords changed, mail that stopped arriving in my name. When I confronted her, she flipped it around with practiced ease. "You don't trust me. That's the problem. You've never believed in me. I wanted to. God knows I did. But love turns blind when pride holds the flashlight." That's when Paul stepped back into my life. Paul had been my father's friend, a retired banker with steady eyes and a voice that made you feel both seen and warned. We'd meet for coffee once a month and he'd listen quietly while I vented. One afternoon, I told him about the new deal Vanessa was working on. He leaned back, sipped his coffee and said, "Let me give you something for free, Richard. Never sign what you don't read, especially for love." I laughed it off, but his tone stayed heavy. He went on, "I've seen more men lose their names in ink than in war. Don't let a ring blind you from fine print." At the time, I thought he was being cynical. Marriage was supposed to be about trust. I didn't realize that trust could be weaponized. When I got home that night, I asked Vanessa about the documents she'd filed in my name. She brushed it off with a smile. "You worry too much. I'd never hurt us." She kissed my cheek, and I convinced myself I was overreacting. But months later I noticed changes. Money missing from accounts, new credit cards under our address. She said they were for her boutique project. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd repay it when her business grew. Instead, she grew distant. Trips to the city turned into networking weekends. Phone calls went unanswered. When she came home, she smelled like expensive perfume and new beginnings that didn't include me. I remember one night. She came in late, hair windblown, eyes unfocused. I asked where she'd been. She didn't lie. She didn't even explain. She just said, "You wouldn't understand," and walked past me like I was a stranger. That's when guilt replaced anger. I started thinking maybe she was right. Maybe I had played it too safe, worked too long, dreamed too small. I thought if I'd been more daring, she wouldn't have looked elsewhere for excitement. But guilt is a dangerous thing. It makes you forget who you are and what you stand for. For a while, I let her lead. Financially, emotionally, practically. She wanted to manage the bills? Fine. She wanted to invest? Sure. I thought giving her control would fix the distance. Instead, it built a wall between us, brick by silent brick. Then one day I came home to find her suitcase packed. She said she was going to visit family for a week. She kissed my cheek and said, "Don't worry, everything's under control." It was. Just not by me. When I look back now, I can see every warning sign, every red flag I painted white with love. Paul had seen it too. He called me after hearing rumors about her investments, whispered deals, risky loans, business dinners that sounded more like escapes than work. He sighed through the phone, that same quiet tone as always. "Richard, if she turned your name into her weapon, you'd better learn to use truth as your defense." That line stuck with me. Because he was right. Love had made me trust too easily, but it had also given me something stronger, the patience to wait for the truth to come full circle. That night I opened the old filing cabinet in my garage and found the faded folder marked Power of Attorney 2015. The paper smelled of age, but the ink was sharp, her signature beside mine. I stared at it for a long time before whispering to the empty room, if she turned my name into her weapon, I'd use truth as my defense. The night after the bank confrontation, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain outside had turned into something heavier. That rhythmic, hollow tap that always made me feel like time was knocking. I sat at my desk with my laptop open, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. My inbox had hundreds of messages, invoices, bills, correspondence from contractors. But buried between the everyday noise, I found them. Emails from Vanessa, not written to me, but from me. Subject lines like authorization for purchase transfer and financial verification, signed, glared back in black and white. I clicked one open, my pulse steady but my jaw tight. It was short. Approved. Proceed with the line of credit under joint authority. Richard Hale. Except I never wrote it. The signature was mine, yes, copied from old documents. The phrasing even sounded like me, formal and clipped. But the email header showed it came from her laptop. I scrolled further, opening attachments, PDF files with e-signatures, property appraisals, escrow updates. Everything tied to my name. Every authorization backed by that single piece of paper I'd signed years ago. The power of attorney. That document had become a skeleton key, one she'd used in secret to unlock whatever she wanted. By dawn, my coffee was cold, my patience thinner than the paper trail she'd left behind. I called Paul. He didn't sound surprised when I told him. "You said she's got a realtor friend, right?" "Yes," I said. "Why?" "Then she's not working alone," he replied flatly. "She's laundering ownership through a trust or shell company. You need to trace the money, not the signatures." Within an hour we were sitting in his study, walls lined with old banking ledgers and framed certificates. He looked like a man built from caution and experience. Paul slid a pad across the table. "Start from the beginning. List every account she's touched in the last 5 years." I wrote down everything I could remember. Business accounts, joint savings, the trust we'd opened when we first started investing. He stopped me at one line. "Wait, Hale Partners Family Trust?" I nodded. "It's old. I used it for my contracting business back in the day." She said it wasn't active anymore. Paul frowned. "Then that's where she hid it." He tapped his pen. "If she used that trust to finance the purchase, then every dollar tied to that loan falls under your business entity, not hers." The words hit slow, like thunder after lightning. She hadn't just stolen from me. She'd done it using something that legally still belonged to me. Paul leaned back, sighing. "You'll need to verify it, but if I'm right, she built her beach house on your land, figuratively speaking." I managed a small humorless laugh. "Sounds poetic." He smirked. "Poetry's cheaper than lawyers." That night, I opened Vanessa's old cloud backups. She'd always been careless with passwords, same combinations, same arrogance. Within minutes, I found a folder named Properties. Inside, loan applications, realtor messages, and an email thread that made my stomach turn. It was between her and her realtor friend, Lisa. Vanessa. Richard will never know. He's financially outdated. The man still uses checks. Lisa. You sure he won't contest? Vanessa. He's too proud and too tired. I'll sign it all through the old POA. That line, financially outdated, stung more than any insult she'd ever thrown to my face. I had spent decades mastering precision, balancing blueprints, budgets, and people. I wasn't outdated. I was steady. But to her, steadiness was weakness. I closed the laptop slowly and stared at the faint reflection in the screen, a man she'd stopped seeing long ago. In the quiet, something inside me hardened. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. The next morning I visited my old attorney, a man named Collins who'd helped with my business years ago. He had the kind of office that smelled like ink and old truth. Richard Hale, he said, shaking my hand. Been a long time. I told him everything. The emails, the forged authorizations, the trust. He listened without interruption, only nodding when I mentioned the power of attorney. Finally, he asked, "Do you still have the original document?" I nodded and slid the folder across his desk. He unfolded the pages carefully, reading each line like scripture. Then he looked up at me. "It's still active." I blinked. "After all these years?" He smiled faintly. "Unless revoked in writing, yes. And since you're the principal, that means it's yours to control and or cancel at any time." I leaned back, letting the realization sink in. Vanessa had used that document to steal from me, but in doing so, she'd also left herself completely exposed to it. Collins tapped the bottom line with his pen. "You gave her power, but not permanence. If she acted beyond your consent, you can use this same paper to take everything back." It was like watching the pieces of a broken clock realign, slow, deliberate, inevitable. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not out of spite, but understanding. She thought I was blind to her schemes. She thought time had dulled me. But time doesn't dull the patient. It sharpens them. When I walked out of that office, the sun was setting, golden and low, cutting through the glass like a spotlight. I looked down at the folder in my hand, the faint signature still visible, and felt something settle deep in my chest. She wanted the ocean, the spotlight, the applause. I just wanted the truth. And I had it. As I got into my truck, I whispered to myself, calm and certain. She wanted to own the beach. She forgot who owned the paper. By the end of that week, Vanessa's world was everywhere. It didn't matter where I looked, Facebook, Instagram, the real estate pages. There she was, in a white dress that shimmered against the blue horizon, posing beside a coastal mansion she hadn't paid for yet. The caption under her photo read, "Manifestation works when you stop waiting for men to catch up." 200 likes. Dozens of comments filled with heart emojis and champagne glasses. I stared at the screen for a long time, not angry, not broken, just still. Every post was a monument to her illusion. Perfect hair, perfect smile, and a house built on someone else's credit. Paul walked into my office as I scrolled through the feed. "She's practically giving you evidence," he said dryly. "She's giving me a headline," I replied. "I just haven't written the ending yet." He dropped a folder on my desk. Inside were documents fresh from his legal contacts, amendments to the original power of attorney, notarized and certified. "Everything's been updated," he said. "The old authority is now reassigned to you. You're the only one with legal power over the trust and all assets tied to it." I flipped through the papers carefully. My name glinted at the top, stamped in blue ink. "So this makes it bulletproof?" Paul nodded. "Ironclad. She can't sell, transfer, or finalize anything without your explicit consent. As of this morning, every account she touched now routes back to you." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same document she'd once used to steal from me was now the very thing that would undo her. "She really thought she'd get away with it," Paul muttered, shaking his head. You'd be amazed how many people think paperwork is just paper. I smiled faintly. Paper built my life. She just never bothered to read the blueprint. Over the next few days we worked quietly. No confrontation, no warnings, just precision. Paul contacted the trust's legal custodian and submitted the updated authorization. I signed everything personally, each stroke steady and deliberate. Once processed, the ownership structure shifted, instantly and completely. On paper, she still believed she owned everything. In reality, the house, the loan, even the escrow account were now under my full control. By Friday, the closing date was confirmed. Vanessa posted a video tour of the house. "Here it is, guys," she said, voice sweet as sugar. "When you know your worth, the universe rewards you." The camera panned to the ocean. In the background, I could see the realtor handing her documents. "Closing day tomorrow," she sang to her followers, "finally buying the dream." Paul chuckled when I showed him. "She's narrating her own downfall." I closed the laptop slowly, leaning back in my chair. Let her. The audience deserves a finale. That night, I poured myself a drink and opened the drawer where I kept my phone, the same device filled with old messages she'd sent me over the years. I scrolled through them one by one. "You'll never understand ambition. I need someone who doesn't settle for small things. You're too slow for the life I want." Each text carried a sting once. Now they were just relics, pieces of a past life I'd already outgrown. I thought about all the nights I'd worked late to give her comfort. The years I'd spent saving, building, repairing, all so she could feel safe. And still, she'd looked at me and seen less. I set the phone down and stared at the blueprint pinned to my wall. A drawing of our first home, the one I'd built by hand decades ago. Simple, clean, honest. Every line was straight, every measurement precise. That house had never needed marble floors or ocean views to matter. It was real. That was enough. I picked up my pen and signed the last of the legal documents. The stroke felt final, like closing a circuit. Paul called around midnight. "Everything's processed," he said. "Tomorrow the escrow will clear. But since you're the principal owner, the sale can't legally complete without your sign-off. So, when she signs, she'll be signing a void." I exhaled, long and steady. "She won't see it coming," Paul added quietly. "She never saw much of anything," I said. "That's why she lost what mattered." The rain outside began again, soft, rhythmic, almost peaceful. I looked out the window at the reflection of my small, sturdy house, the wood panels I'd repaired with my own hands, the yard that smelled faintly of cedar and rain. For a long time I'd believed losing her meant losing everything. But sitting there, surrounded by the quiet proof of what I'd built, I realized I'd never been the one who needed to catch up. She was chasing clouds, I was building ground. When I turned off the lamp and stood, I caught my reflection in the dark window. Older, yes, but grounded. Ready. I whispered the same words my father used to say before a hard day's work: measure twice, cut once. Tomorrow would be the cut. I closed the file, locked it in the drawer, and smiled to myself. Calm, steady, resolved. Tomorrow, I said softly. She'd sign for her dream. I'd sign it back to reality. The sky was perfect that morning. Sharp blue ocean breeze drifting inland, the kind of day Vanessa would call photo-worthy. Inside the coastal real estate office, everything gleamed. Glass walls, chrome chairs, the faint scent of new contracts and confidence. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes early, wrapped in luxury, designer dress, pearl earrings, confidence so polished it could have been trademarked. She laughed with the receptionist, flashing her diamond ring under the bright light. "Mrs. Hale," the agent greeted, standing to shake her hand. "Congratulations on your new home. You're right on schedule for closing." Vanessa's smile widened. "Of course. I always am." The agent gestured toward the conference room. A wide glass table, folders neatly stacked, the contract waiting like a coronation crown. "Once your husband arrives," he said cheerfully, We'll just need his final authorization on the joint trust portion. Then we can finalize. She tilted her head slightly, amused. He won't be long. He's probably still processing that I pulled this off. Laughter rippled from the agent and his assistant. Vanessa basked in it. Every movement, every word, designed to broadcast control. Minutes passed. Then the door opened. The laughter stopped. Richard stepped in. Calm, steady, a quiet storm dressed in a grey suit that fit like intention. In his hand, a weathered leather folder. Vanessa froze mid-sentence, her hand halfway to her coffee cup. "Richard," she said, forcing a smile, "you didn't have to come. I've got it handled." He stopped at the head of the table, eyes steady, voice level. "I know," he said softly, "but I thought I'd make sure everything's in order." The agent glanced between them, confused but polite. "Mr. Hale, welcome. We just need your authorization before—" Richard placed the folder on the table and opened it. The sound of paper sliding against wood was sharper than any shout. "No need for authorization," he said. "I'm the legal principal on record." The room went still. Vanessa blinked. "What are you talking about?" He handed the agent a document, the original power of attorney, freshly notarized and reactivated. The blue seal glinted in the morning light. The agent frowned, flipping through the pages. The silence stretched until his assistant leaned over and whispered something. The agent's eyes widened. "Mr. Hale," he said slowly, "according to this, you hold full legal authority over the trust, the funds, and the property associated with this purchase." Vanessa's voice cracked slightly. "That can't be right, Richard turned toward her, calm as the tide. "You used my name to buy it," he said, "but you used a trust that belongs entirely to me." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The agent's assistant checked the escrow records on her tablet, frowning deeper with each line. "It's true," she murmured. "Ownership reverts entirely to the principal holder. The loan, the deed, everything is under Mr. Hale's name." Gasps whispered through the room. The realtor, trying to steady the tension, asked weakly, "So, does that mean—" Richard nodded once. "It means the house is mine." Vanessa looked around desperately, to the lawyer, to the agent, to the assistant, searching for an ally who no longer existed. "This was supposed to be my home," she said, voice trembling. Richard's reply was soft, almost kind. "You made it mine the moment you forged my name." The lawyer at the corner of the table cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Legally, she cannot contest this. The transfer was executed under his authority. The deed now belongs solely to Mr. Hale." Her charm crumbled. The confident woman who'd walked in wearing sunlight now sat pale under fluorescent light. Richard gathered his folder, buttoned his jacket, and looked at her one last time. "You wanted ocean views," he said quietly. "You just didn't read the fine print on the tide." He turned toward the agent, his tone all business now. "Please forward the closing documents to my attorney. I'll handle the rest." Vanessa reached for his arm, her voice breaking. "Richard, please. We can fix this." He stopped, looked at her hand, then at her. "Fix it," he repeated softly. "No, you build it right the first time or it falls apart." She let go. He walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing down the glass corridor. Reporters outside were already gathering, whispers of a credit scandal spreading from the courthouse to the coast. As the door closed behind him, Vanessa slumped in her chair, staring at the unsigned contract in front of her, her dream home now nothing more than a reflection in someone else's name. Richard stepped out into the sunlight, inhaling deeply. The ocean wind hit his face, cool and free. He smiled faintly, not with victory, but with peace. "She used my name to buy it," he murmured to himself. "I used her greed to take it back." The moment Richard stepped outside the office, the crisp ocean air hit him. Salt and silence mixed with the faint sound of waves crashing just beyond the street. He barely made it 3 steps before the glass doors swung open behind him. "Richard!" Vanessa's voice cut through the hum of traffic. He turned slightly, enough to see her storming down the steps. Sunglasses gone, her carefully pinned hair unraveling in the breeze. "You embarrassed me in there," she shouted. People nearby, a valet, a couple passing by, turned to look. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "No, Vanessa," he said evenly. "You exposed yourself." She stopped short, her face tightening. "You think this is funny? You humiliated me in front of everyone. My realtor, my lawyer, my friends." "They weren't laughing with you, Vanessa," he interrupted quietly. "They were just waiting to see how far you'd fall." Her tone softened, desperation replacing rage. "We can fix this," she said, stepping closer. "You can keep the house. I just want part of the profits when you sell it." He looked at her for a long moment, the kind of silence that weighs more than words. Then, slowly, he pulled the worn folder from under his arm, the power of attorney she'd once weaponized. He extended it toward her. "Here," he said. "You wanted control. Read what you signed." She hesitated, then snatched it from his hand. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside, her own signature stared back, dated, notarized, irreversible. He watched her face as she traced the lines of the document, the realization dawning slow and heavy. You changed this," she stammered. He nodded. "No, Vanessa. You changed it the moment you forged my name. I just gave it back to the person it belonged to." Her voice cracked. "You can't just—" "I can," he said softly, "because I built everything you tried to take." The folder slipped slightly in her grip. He could see the panic in her eyes, not because of the loss, but because she finally understood she'd never been in control at all. He stepped closer, his voice low, measured. "Do you know what this really was, Vanessa? Not revenge, just truth catching up." She swallowed hard, trying to find words. None came. He looked down at the document one last time, then back at her. "You signed these papers years ago because you said you trusted me. I trusted you too. The difference is, I didn't break mine." He turned, beginning to walk toward his truck. Behind him, she called out, "Richard, wait." He paused but didn't turn around. "I built a life on trust," he said quietly. "You built yours on signatures." A long breath of wind carried his next words away as he walked to his car, calm, resolute. One lasts longer. Vanessa stood on the curb, the folder still open in her trembling hands, staring at the proof of her own undoing as the man she'd underestimated drove away without looking back. Months later, the beach looked different, not because the tide had changed, but because Richard finally had. The house that once symbolized betrayal now stood as something new. The Hale Lodge, a retreat for small builders and veterans rebuilding their lives. Where greed once echoed, laughter now filled the halls. Hammers clicked, wood dust floated through golden light. Creation, not corruption, had reclaimed the space. Richard walked the balcony each morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise spill across the ocean. The same horizon Vanessa once posed in front of. But now, it was quiet, honest. Paul arrived one afternoon, still wearing his banker's jacket, though retirement had softened his posture. He looked around with a faint grin. "You rebuilt peace from betrayal," he said. "That's rarer than money." Richard smiled. "Money collapses fast. Peace takes time." They stepped into the main hall, now filled with framed photographs, students learning trades, volunteers fixing homes, community events. On one wall hung the original power of attorney document, encased in glass. Below it, in small brass lettering, the inscription read, "Power means nothing without honor." Paul stared at it for a moment, nodding quietly. "Fitting." Richard exhaled, looking around. This place was supposed to be a prize. Now it's a purpose. Outside, a group of young apprentices worked on a small deck extension. The rhythmic sound of saws and laughter filled the air. Richard watched them with quiet pride. Men and women who knew struggle, who understood what it meant to build something from nothing. He thought about Vanessa once more, just for a moment. Word around town was that she'd vanished, deleted her accounts, lost her properties, disappeared into silence. He didn't wish her harm, only clarity. The ocean breeze carried the faint scent of salt and pine through the open windows. He felt light again, not victorious, just whole. He turned to Paul. "You know, she built castles on credit," he said softly. "I built peace on truth." Paul smiled. "That's why yours will last." The two men stood in silence, listening to the waves, the laughter, and the sound of new beginnings being nailed into place. Richard looked once more at the framed document on the wall, the same one that had started everything. The paper that nearly destroyed him had become his reminder that truth doesn't need force. It just needs time. He smiled faintly, the sunlight warming his face as he whispered to himself, "Revenge ends when truth stands tall." And for the first time in years, Richard Hale felt like he'd finally built something that would never fall apart.